You already know the new laws: attraction, vibration, assumption. Here's what almost nobody mentions. Every one of them is a restatement of something written down in 1908, in a book that listed 7 laws, not 3. So what happened to the other 4? 2 sets of laws describe how consciousness shapes reality. One is 118 years old and lists 7. The other is on every manifestation podcast and lists about 3. Most people treat them as separate traditions. One sounds like something from a dusty occult shop. The other sounds like a podcast episode. That surface reading is misleading. They're the same system, written in 2 vocabularies, for 2 different audiences. Nobody here is wrong. But one list is longer, and the missing pieces are the useful ones. Here's the practical problem. If you've practiced manifestation for any length of time, you've noticed it works unevenly. Some weeks the world seems to bend. Other weeks nothing moves. And most modern teaching is very good at explaining the good weeks. It's much quieter about the bad ones. You get told to raise your vibration, and when your vibration won't rise, you're told to raise it harder. That's not a failure of effort. It's a gap in the map. The older system had names for exactly the things that go wrong, and those names didn't survive the trip into modern teaching. So, let's lay the whole thing out. 7 Hermetic principles: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. I'll show you where each one lives in modern manifestation language. 3 of them you'll recognize immediately. 4 of them will be new, and those 4 are where your practice has been running blind. First principle: mentalism. The Kybalion states it in 6 words. The all is mind. The universe is mental. Reality isn't fundamentally made of matter. It's made of mind. Matter, in that text language, is just interrupted energy, force vibrating at a very low rate inside a much larger mind. And we live and move and have our being inside it. The book explains this with a beautiful image. Think of Shakespeare writing Hamlet. Shakespeare is genuinely inside Hamlet. Every line the character speaks came out of him. His mind is what gives the character life. And yet Shakespeare never stops being Shakespeare. He's immanent in the character and larger than it at the same time. Now here's Neville Goddard, writing decades later, in a completely different idiom. Consciousness is the one and only reality. And the outer world? He calls it man's conditioned consciousness objectified. Read those 2 claims next to each other. The Kybalion says the universe is mental. Goddard says consciousness is the only reality. That is not a family resemblance. That's the same sentence in 2 dialects, and Goddard didn't leave that abstract. In 1933, he was broke in New York and wanted to reach Barbados. His teacher, a man he called Abdullah, refused to discuss how. He just told him, flatly, "You are in Barbados. Not you will be. You are." So every night, in a New York apartment, Goddard slept as though he were lying in his father's house in Barbados. Every fact in his life contradicted it. He did it anyway, for about a month. Then what he called a bridge of incidents appeared, an unexpected gift of money, a ticket, and he sailed. And that story contains his single sharpest instruction. Don't think about the state. Think from it. Because, his words, you cannot be in the state of wish fulfillment and desire it at the same time. Wanting something is evidence you've placed yourself outside of having it. And once you accept that premise, everything downstream follows. If reality is mental, then changing your inner state isn't self-help. It's the only lever there is. Second principle: correspondence. You've heard this one, even if you've never opened the book. As above, so below. As below, so above. Here's the part that gets lost. In its original form, this isn't primarily about your feelings. It's a claim about structure, that there's a harmony and agreement between the laws of every plane of existence. The physical, the mental, the spiritual. The Kybalion calls it a master key because it lets you reason from the known to the unknown. Their example is deliberately extreme. Study the monad, the smallest unit of existence, and you can understand the archangel, because both run on the same laws. Modern teaching narrowed that. It kept one axis of it, as within, so without. Your outer circumstances mirror your inner state. That's a real and useful application. It's just one plane of a claim that originally covered all of them. And I want to be careful here, because narrowing isn't the same as losing. A narrowed law is often a more usable one. Telling somebody their relationships mirror their self-image is actionable this afternoon. Telling them the monad mirrors the archangel is not. So when someone tells you your life is a mirror, they're quoting Hermetic Correspondence. They've just pointed it at one thing instead of everything. Third principle, and the most familiar of all, vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. The claim is that the difference between matter, energy, mind, and spirit isn't a difference in kind. It's a difference in rate. Everything is the same thing moving at different speeds. Modern teaching took that and made it personal. Abraham Hicks calls emotions vibrational interpreters, readouts telling you what frequency you're currently running. Joe Dispenza describes a state of being as an electromagnetic signature, thought as the electrical charge, feeling as the magnetic one. And here modern teaching genuinely adds something the old text never had. Hicks built an instrument, a 22-degree emotional scale running from joy and empowerment at the top to fear, grief, and powerlessness at the bottom, with one instruction: don't leap. Reach for the thought that gives you relief. 17 seconds of focus activates a vibration. 68 seconds, and it starts to move. Think about what that actually solves. The Kybalion tells you everything vibrates, and that mental states have rates. What it never gives you is a way to find out where you are right now. Hicks's scale is exactly that missing gauge. It turns an abstract principle into something you can check in about 4 seconds. That's not a watered-down version of anything. That's a measuring device bolted onto a principle that, in 1908, was pure metaphysics. The new laws aren't the poor relation here. On this one, they're ahead. Fourth principle: polarity. And this is where it gets interesting, because this is the one the modern side kept, without keeping its name. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Heat and cold aren't two things, they're one scale. Love and hate, the same. Courage and fear, the same, which gives you a very specific technique. You don't destroy fear to get courage. You can't. They're the same substance. You raise it along its own scale until it reads as courage. The Kybalion calls that transmutation. Now listen to Florence Scovel Shinn. What you resist persists. As long as you push against a situation, you keep it, because you're feeding it your attention. And her stronger version: nothing on earth can resist an absolutely non-resistant person. That's polarity. Every bit of it. Pivoting from what you don't want to what you do, that's sliding along the pole. Reaching for relief instead of leaping to joy, that's moving by degree. The modern side didn't lose this law. It just stopped calling it by its old name, which is worth sitting with, because it tells you the modern teaching isn't a lossy copy. It's a working inheritance. Some laws came through with new names. Fifth principle: rhythm. And this is the first one with no common modern equivalent, and the one I'd argue you need most. Everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Read that again, because it's making an uncomfortable promise. The height of your good phase sets the depth of the one that follows. The swing is not a malfunction. It's the law working correctly. Now compare that to what you're usually told. Stay high vibe, protect your frequency, keep your state elevated. Which is lovely advice right up until the swing arrives, and then it quietly implies you did something wrong. The Hermetic answer is a third option, and it's not fight and it's not endure. It's called the law of neutralization. You polarize yourself at a higher level of consciousness and consciously refuse to identify with the downswing. The pendulum still swings. It just passes beneath you instead of carrying you. Notice that those are genuinely three different moves. Fighting the mood keeps your attention locked on it, which by the law of polarity is the one thing guaranteed to sustain it. Riding it means identifying with it, becoming the mood rather than having it. Neutralization is the third door. You stay conscious, you decline to call the swing you, and you let it complete its arc without you inside it. And this is where the older map quietly rescues the newer one. Because if your framework has no concept of a lawful downswing, then every low week reads as evidence that you're doing it wrong. You start managing your own emotional state like a failing exam. The Hermetic version tells you the tide going out is the same law as the tide coming in. If you've ever wondered why your practice collapses every few weeks, that's not you failing the law. That's a law nobody named for you. Sixth principle: cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Nothing escapes the law. And the text is blunt about where most people sit inside it. Its word is pawns, moved by environment, by heredity, by suggestion, and by the wills of people stronger than them. Not because they're weak, because they never noticed they were being moved. The Hermetic aim isn't to attract better circumstances. It's to change your position in the equation. To stop being an effect of the world and start being a cause in it. To become, in their language, a mover rather than a pawn. And the text builds in a warning here that modern teaching rarely repeats. It calls it half-wisdom, the state of someone who's grasped that reality is mental and concludes the rules therefore don't apply to them. The Kybalion's phrase for what happens to those people is that they're broken against the rocks. Mastery isn't denying the lower plane while you're still standing on it. It's using the higher laws to work the lower ones. That's a subtle but real difference in posture. Much modern practice is receptive by design. Align, allow, receive. The older frame is generative. Both are legitimate. But if you only ever practice the receptive half, you're operating one side of a law that has two. Seventh and last. Gender. And forget everything the word suggests. This isn't about men and women. It's about the two halves of any act of creation. The Kybalion says every mind contains both. There's the I, will, direction, intention. And there's the me, the receptive, generative field where images actually form. The text calls it the mental womb, and the claim is that nothing gets created by either half alone. Will without imagination is strain, clenching your jaw at a vision board. Imagination without will is daydreaming. Creation happens when the I turns toward the me and energizes it. This is the missing diagnostic for most failed manifesting. People assume the problem is insufficient desire, so they apply more will. But if the imaginative half is thin, more will just produces more tension. You can't force a womb to conceive by pushing on it. Here's a way to test which half is thin. Picture the thing you want. If the picture is vague but the wanting is loud, your will is doing all the work and your imagination is starving. If the picture is vivid but nothing ever moves, the opposite. You're daydreaming without direction. Both halves, or neither works. So that's the full 7. And now the question the whole video has been walking toward. Why do these two systems agree so precisely? Before we get there, one story, because it shows every one of these laws firing at once. Goddard told the story of a young waitress in San Diego who wanted, badly, to see Samoa. No money, no plausible route. She was riding a streetcar in the rain, and she began to claim, mentally, this isn't rain, this is spray from the ocean, and this isn't San Diego, this is a ship, and I'm coming into the Bay of Samoa. She held that state until it felt more real than the streetcar. About a month later, an unexpected inheritance arrived, and she sailed to Samoa. Now watch what she actually did. She treated the mental state as the real one. That's mentalism. She let the outer world answer the inner. Correspondence. She held it until it felt real rather than wished for. Vibration. And she pointed deliberate will at a vivid image. That's mental gender, both halves engaged. 4 Hermetic laws, in a streetcar, from a woman who had almost certainly never read the Kybalion. So why do these two systems line up this precisely? The obvious answer is that modern teachers read the old book and borrowed from it. That's part of it. But it isn't the whole story. In 1906, a man named William Walker Atkinson published a book called Thought Vibration, or The Law of Attraction in the Thought World. It's one of the books that put the phrase law of attraction into circulation in the first place. 2 years later, a book appeared called The Kybalion, presenting the 7 Hermetic principles, credited to 3 anonymous authors calling themselves the 3 initiates. Scholars now agree those 3 initiates were almost certainly one man, and that the man was Atkinson. He claimed the authorship himself in a Who's Who in America entry in 1912. The style matches his other work. He founded the publishing house that printed it. It isn't absolutely proven, but it's the settled view, which reframes this entire comparison. The old laws and the new laws were never rival traditions. The same man wrote the foundational text of each, 2 years apart. He didn't write 2 systems. He wrote one system, twice. Once for people who wanted a practice they could use on a Tuesday, and once for people who wanted the physics underneath it. You've been reading half of his work and calling it modern. So here's what to actually do with this. You don't need to abandon the modern practice. It's the same system and it works. You just get 4 instruments back. When the swing comes, stop treating it as failure and rise above the plane it swings on. When you're waiting to receive, ask what cause you could set instead. When wanting harder isn't working, feed the image rather than the will. I'm curious which of the 4 landed hardest for you. My guess is rhythm, the pendulum one, because almost nobody is told the downswing is lawful. Tell me in the comments which one you'd never heard before. And if you want to see what happens when these same Hermetic laws get applied to something much more practical than metaphysics, watch the one on the Kybalion and the 4 agreements next. Same 7 laws. Very different room. Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments what you'd like us to cover next. And check out our website, thedeepsynthesis.com, where we go deeper on every topic, plus a free convergence map waiting for you.